Cozy listened for the closing of the door before she peered through the crack again. Her mother was sitting on the bed, her back to the closet. Big Ange moaned and threw herself on her husband's chest. "Johnny," she pleaded, "don't die. I love you. I need you." Cozy heard the anguish in her mother's voice and wanted badly to escape the closet to offer words of comfort, but she knew her mother all too well. Fear of her mother's temper kept her rooted to the closet floor, and she hesitated long enough to see the bedspread shift, and her mother leaned back. Her father was moving. Cozy put her ears close to the door as she dared, straining to hear her father's voice. "Angie," her father gasped, I need to tell you something, in case Father Martin doesn't get here. I need to confess a sin, so I can die in peace and rest in the hands of the Lord." Her mother began to cry softly. "What is it, Johnny? Tell your Angie." Her father's breathing was labored, his words coming in short bursts. "It's hard to say this. I've been unfaithful." Her mother sat up and took a deep breath. "I knew it," she cried, shaking her head. "I knew all along, you rotten louse." She started weeping in earnest and wiped at her eyes with her apron. "You're a shithead, Johnny, but my hand to God, I swear if you live, I'll forgive you. I need you. How am I going to raise 3 kids without a husband?" There was silence before Johnny spoke again. "There's more. Your sister Rosa. She came out to me. Please forgive me." Cozy was confused. "What did he just say about Aunt Rosa?" "My sister?" her mother demanded. "My damn sister?" The rise in Big Ange's voice was a familiar prelude to one of her violent outbursts. Cozy watched her mother push herself off the bed and stomp toward the door. Suddenly she came into view again, hovering inches over Johnny's face. "You stinking piece of Irish shit," she hissed. Cozy watched in horror as her mother twisted around, grabbed the heavy plaster infant of Prague statue sitting on the chest of drawers beside the bed and held it like a club over her father's head. Johnny simply closed his eyes, resigned to his fate. Her mother screamed, "Porco bastardo!" turned and hurled the statue at the window. The glass shattered, and moments later, Cozy felt frigid air creeping beneath the closet door. Again, her mother thrust her face inches from her father's nose. "I curse you and hope your soul rots in hell." "Angelica," Johnny wheezed as Big Inch picked up the last rites crucifix, slammed it back up on the wall, and stood, waiting. Cozy watched her father's hand reach, trembling for her mother's, only to drop back on the bed. There was a soft knock. "Ange, is everything all right in there?" It was Aunt Rosa's voice outside the bedroom door. Big Ange clenched her fist and headed toward the door, but stopped mid-step. The sudden composure in her mother's voice was almost as chilling to Cozy as the threat of violence. "Call the priest," said her mother, "and tell him he's too late." Okay, so I'm going to give you one more short reading. I chose this next scene to introduce you. It's a little later in the book. I chose it to introduce some of the themes you're going to find throughout this book. The challenges of single motherhood, especially at this time. Rust Belt cities in decline, the fallout from 3 high-profile assassinations within a 5-year period, and the overall turbulence in our country during this time period. Buffalo was abuzz. Cozy ran home from school on April Fool's Day, having learned President Johnson announced the night before that he would not run again, clearing the way for Senator Robert Kennedy of New York to run for president on the Democratic ticket. When she told little Ange, her sister squealed with joy, did a little dance, and decided it was time to become an involved citizen. 2 days later, little Ange, Cozy's older sister, hung out at the local Democratic campaign headquarters after school, brought home a large poster of the senator's face, and hung it on her bedroom wall. She handed out "Sock it to him, Bobby" campaign pins to her family and friends. Her mother shook her head and threw hers in a drawer. "A single mother's got no time for politics," she told her irritated daughter. On the 4th of April, little Ange turned on the TV. "Senator Kennedy is giving a campaign speech in Indianapolis tonight," she said imperiously. "We need to watch the news." That's a first, thought Cozy. Since when had her sister ever shown interest in the news? Cozy watched little Ange adjust the rabbit ear's antenna, trying to reduce the static on the black and white screen. The picture was still fuzzy when Walter Cronkite looked up from his papers and into the camera. "Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee." The sisters looked at each other. Little Ange grabbed the rabbit ears again, trying to improve the sound. Cozy knelt in front of the screen to hear better. "Governor Buford Ellington has called out 4,000 National Guardsmen, and police report that the murder has touched off sporadic acts of violence in the Negro section of the city," Walter Cronkite continued, pressing a sound piece to his ear. "Holy shit, we're in for it now," said little Ange. The next evening, they sat wrapped in front of the TV, switching among the 3 channels, listening as broadcasters reported on the news as it came over the wires. There was a clip of a somber Robert Kennedy on the back of a flatbed truck in Indianapolis, where he announced Dr. King's assassination to a mostly black audience in a poor part of the city. People screamed and cried when the senator broke the news, while he tried to compose himself and said he felt their pain. He reminded them of his brother's assassination, still fresh in everyone's mind. "What we need in the United States is not division," he told the crowd, appealing for calm. "What we need in the United States is not violence or lawlessness, but love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice towards those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or they be black." "He's going to be our next president. I can feel it," Cozy murmured. "He'll stop all this violence." Her mother and sister stood silently behind her, for once not arguing. With a shake of her head, Big Ange reached down and switched off the television. "Let's eat," she said. "God knows we'll need our strength." Tensions flared in the poor sections of Buffalo, as in many cities around the country, and not for the first time. The year before, all of Buffalo was on edge when riots broke out across a broad swath of the impoverished East Side, one of 159 riots that exploded across the country during the long, hot summer of 1967. For 5 days, angry crowds smashed cars and broke windows. Uncle Tommy and many other police officers were called to try to stop the mayhem. And Cozy's whole family, even the DiGiacomos, prayed for his sake. Newspapers reported the number of injured each day as the violence threatened to spill over to other parts of the city. Dr. King had come to Buffalo to call for peace just 5 months before his murder. Cozy could sense her mother's growing anxiety. The latest riots just added to the long list of worries she had for her family. Their West Side neighborhood had always been tight-knit, and the people here looked out for each other. But signs of decay had already begun to seep into the neighborhood. Every now and then, a member of the non-existent local mafia was found shot to death in a restaurant or car. brazen robberies and physical assaults were on the rise. Street gangs that called themselves frats vandalized buildings, terrorized neighborhoods, fought each other for turf, and increasingly roamed the streets with impunity. Rapes and sexual assaults were frequent, but discussed only in whispers amongst the women. Her mother began to believe that dangers lurked everywhere, and she was powerless to protect her family. Thank you very much.
Very dramatic thing, first for a family and then for a nation. In my other life, I'm a drama director, and Moxie, you passed the audition. Some special events that the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center sponsor. One of them is already in our rearview mirror, but back on July 14th, we sponsored a book fair on Vester Plaza. So if you've written a book and you might be around during July next season, you can apply to be part of that book fair. The website, our webpage, is chq.org/FCWC. That holds true for lots of the things I'll be talking about. The annual writing contest, the submission deadline is this Sunday. So please, if you've been thinking about entering, do so. Go to that same website, chq.org/FCWC, and you can find a way to submit your writing no matter what age you are. We have categories for all ages. If you don't think of yourself as a writer, but you're an avid reader and you have a favorite poem, a poem that means a lot to you personally, and it's no longer than about a page. Okay, so no Iliad or Odyssey, please. On August 5th in the Hall of Philosophy, we sponsored the Robert Pinsky Favorite Poem Project, which Robert Pinsky himself kicked off here, must be at least 20 years ago now. You need to apply a few days before that so we can make selection. Once again, that website, I'm tempted to leave it here, but chq.org/FCWC. And another reminder that books by these two authors will be for sale after the readings and after the Q&A. Please be thinking of questions you might have for these accomplished authors. Carol Jennings is our next author and reader. She grew up in East Aurora, New York, attended the College of Worcester, graduated from NYU, and earned a JD from the NYU School of Law. She resides in Washington, D.C., where for most of her legal career, she served in the Federal Trade Commission's Bureau of Consumer Protection. Her poems have appeared in various journals, including the New York Quarterly, Chautauqua, the Broadkill Review, Beltway Poetry Quarterly, Potomac Review, Medical Literary Messenger, Loch Raven Review, and Gargoyle Magazine, as well as 3 anthologies. 2 of her poems have won awards at Chautauqua in that writing contest I mentioned. Yes. Her first poetry collection, The Dead Spirits at the Piano, was published by Cherry Grove Collections in 2016. Her second collection, The Sustained Pedal, was also published by Cherry Grove Collections in 2022. Both are available at the Chautauqua Bookstore, at the Octagon, and also up front here. Carol Jennings.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? I want to start with a poem from the Dead Spirits at the Piano about the poet John Keats, who was my first love as a teenager, and I read him in high school English. And then many decades later, I was visiting Rome and visited the house where he died and the room where he died overlooking the Spanish Steps. And this poem came out of that. In Rome with John Keats. In the small room where you died, I stand at the end of a narrow bed, as perhaps you did on better days. Stare out the window at Bernini's boat, still sinking on the Piazza di Spagna. And had you not been so weak, his marble boat, like the Elgin marbles, might have sparked another ode or sonnet on mortality, a new metaphor for the life slowly leaving you. In those last days, to which poem did you turn for comfort? I would guess the nightingale, your darkling singing to you in full-throated summer ecstasy out of the embalming dark, in high requiem for a coming February death. Or could it be the urn, with lovers on the brink, like you and Fanny, bliss always out of reach? Nothing is left of your time here, said Severn's deathbed portrait. Tendrils of hair damp on your forehead, lids shut, candles throwing shadows on your face, still perfect at the end. Though they burned all you touched in a bonfire below, you linger here, listening for footsteps on the stair, horses on the square, mandolin players on the Spanish Steps, a poem in the blood rising in your throat. Now, the first poem in the sustained pedal, called A Flickering Light, and kind of deals with my relationship to light, how I'm very uplifted and energized by long days, summer solstice, and then the opposite at winter solstice, and kind of learning how to deal with that. A flickering light. Why so much time before I grasped its place in my life? Before I understood the possibility to bend and stretch, fold it into poems, stories, save it for dark seasons, follow it north or south, depending upon month and hemisphere, or simply keep it in some mind pocket until needed to deflect the dark. As a child enthralled to midsummer light, enough to bicycle home at 9 o'clock, with no thought about the slant of it to come, as days shorten and insects grow frantic and shrill about sex and death. I thought I could use it all up, the euphoria, reserve nothing for later. Now I have mastered the art, or perhaps trick, of parsing it out in lesser portions to make it last, the way a flickering light can trick the eye to see it as a constant, and knowing this may be the antidote to everything. This poem, called After a Certain Age, I wrote it for my 70th birthday, and I had my 80th this year, but it's still relevant. After a certain age, do not count the number of funerals attended, people who have professed to love you, foreign countries not visited, vanishing rings of Saturn, wrong notes played in a Mozart sonata, or inches of sea level rise. And do not listen to the noise that is news, nor the harsh words of the DA theory. You will know when you have reached that age. Pay attention to stars in the darkest skies, planets visible to your unaided eye, lengthening daylight after winter solstice, layers of igneous rock in deep canyons, your ancestors. Time is an artificial construction, music that outlived its composer. I have two glacier poems. I've been fascinated by glaciers since I learned about them in earth science in the 9th grade. And I love the language of glaciers. It's so beautiful because it's French. When I took earth science, my textbook said the ice age could come again, which gave me some concern. But now, of course, the concern is glaciers going away. First one is called calving. Greenland glaciers calve with sonorous ring, while ablation of ice mass turns blue meltwater rivulets into quiet rivers to the sea. I fell in love with glaciers because their language is rich with French, and also feared them because my earth science text warned another ice age could come, though not quickly. I made a list of things to do. Walk and kneel on a glacier top, drink the waters of a moulin, see the Matterhorn, read tales of hikers falling in a crevasse, listen to the harmonies of calving. Now I have done all of these and no longer fear the ice, but the loss of it. Glaciers, centuries that warn of ancient microbes, the warm human fingerprints, the tipping point, Greenland waters at the door. And the next one is called Moulin, which is, you probably know, is a hole in the glacier filled with glacial meltwaters. This was inspired by a poem by the Irish poet Seamus Heaney called Postscript, which it has nothing to do with glaciers, but he's inviting the reader to visit the west coast of Ireland and let the wind and the waves there do their work on you. And the last line is something about blowing a hole in you. And so my poem is suggesting that you visit glaciers. Moulin, take the time to walk back to the Pleistocene. Just off the highway between Jasper and Banff, park the car aboard a snow bus that deposits you on the ice field where you can guzzle glacial meltwater from a moulin, water with the purity that preceded your species. Pay attention or you could tumble into a crevasse from which you would not emerge until the ice is melted. Kneel down, touch the glacial tongue with reverence, but know that you violate it. Consider that it recedes and loses depth beneath your body, that it may disappear within the life of your child. Let the ice pierce a hole in you, even as it melts. I like to use poems to have conversations with people who are no longer around, which could be friends and family members, but also the composers that I most enjoy listening to and playing on the piano. And of course, it's usually pretty much a one-way conversation. But this one, I try to have a bit of a conversation with Beethoven. Conversation with Beethoven. He glowered, as he often did before. I wonder if this will be possible. He was deaf. I don't speak German. Does language still matter, I ask? He shakes his head. This was to be your year, 250th birthday celebration. He half smiled. Every orchestra programmed you, all the symphonies and concertos, Missa Solemnis, Fidelio, quartets. But a novel virus seized the living world. Everything had to be canceled. He shrugs as though he knows or perhaps doesn't care much. Do you pay attention to performances anymore? He shakes his head. I'm guessing you like the size of orchestras now. It's what you always wanted, isn't it? Again, he almost smiled. I'm suddenly aware of music, unlike any I've ever heard. What is that? Where is it coming from? It's not like anything you ever wrote. Finally, he smiles, motions me closer. Speaks in a language I do not know, but understand. I am no longer bound by a system of tones that can be sketched on paper. I am truly free. And then I have another Beethoven poem. I really love it. If you ever studied piano, you probably have sometimes played for Elise. And I tried to do a little research on who Elise might have been, and it turns out nobody knows, and she may not have been real. His handwriting was so bad that the publisher may have misread whatever he wrote on the score. And the score was actually found in the papers of a woman named Therese. He had loved and asked her to marry him, and she wisely turned him down. He would have been a terrible husband. But I tried to take the point of view of Elise. So this was for Beethoven from Elise. You ruined me for other men, you know. I have been loved by others more handsome than you, with gentle touch and pretty words. But each time I begin to fall, your teasing eighth notes that presage the melody force through me to intervene. It was a trifle for you, your A minor bagatelle with its little arcs and bridges, always coming back to that winsome lyric, forever implanted in my body and brain, a theme that never fully resolved, like my feelings for you. Your publisher got my name wrong due to your terrible handwriting. Elise does not exist, though she will outlive me to taunt generations of piano students who will love or hate her for testing them, making fun of their imperfect playing, much as you did to me. I could never possess you or you me, yet because of that little piece, dashed off in an hour, no doubt, we will stay forever linked, what we both wanted, I believe. And from Beethoven to Mendelssohn, I really love his songs without words and play them, the ones that I can play on the piano. There's no program content, nothing to suggest what it is about. It's just he leaves it to the listener, the performer, to what images they evoke. With me, it's often spring, light. My mother, who also played these pieces, Scotland. My mother was a Campbell. So the poem is called Meditation, Spring, Mendelssohn, Songs Without Words. It was never just about lengthening light, the sun shifting hemispheres, buds that presage blossoms, or my being born. There was always a darker side. And then death happened, father at equinox, mother a few days before. Spring became about endings too. Whatever the season or infection circling the world, I returned to Mendelssohn's later Ona Vorta, Songs Without Words for piano, and try to bar from my conscious self any language but tone. These songs are not about anything. At 9, Mendelssohn set Psalm 19 to music. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament show us his handiwork. Later, he decided words were too limiting. Poems could be built solely with tone. In the Hebrides, he created a landscape without word or paint, calling it first Lonely Island. Open fifth chords flow like the ancient lava that formed hexagonal pillars of black basalt and fingered stairs. He enters it with no skiff, just violas, cellos, and bassoons in the key of D minor. I encountered Scotland first through Mendelssohn and reflect on memory of the Castle Campbell ruins, lonely in a field of heather, as I work out voicing and fingering of his arpeggiated chords. At the piano, my mother would allow no spoken words in the room. I take it further and exclude the silent ones as well. And now to Chopin, the held note for Chopin. You, storyteller of the long note, count of the harmonic hours, flutterer of the sustained pedal, singer of two voices in the right hand, liberator of thumb to play black keys, and fifth finger to find half timbre. Here a piano player in veiled clarity, small hands with supple wrists, hands set in marble, a composer for the short life. Let me play your nocturne for my own dark. Let someone discover an unknown melody that was in your mind as you lay dying. Let me find the second voice each time I read you. Let your held note be a candle on my way to sleep. Let us be lovers in a dream. And then back to the dead spirits. This poem was written after having knee surgery, which I'm sure some of you have had and others have to look forward to. The art of the scalpel. Inner landscape of my knee, white spheres captured on pencil-thin camera, threaded into fissure of flesh, while I was drugged and dreamt of striped fish and coral reefs. Before pictures reveal a tattered topography, tosses from horses, falls downstairs, stumbles on cracked walks, kneeling on stone surfaces in prayer or despair. My search and display was after photos, clean sculpture, cartilage, edges round, ragged fragments trimmed, meniscus tear mended, signs of age obliterated. I admire his art, as he expects. What else can you cut for me, I want to ask? Shards of unwanted memory, shrapnel of love gone bad, or the cancer of self-doubt? But I have no more joints to fix, so he dismisses me, proffers his photos as parting gifts. Pretty moon, luminous on black background, orthopedic purity, no blood, no scars. Have a nice life, he smiles and leaves. How am I doing on time? Okay, this is a new one, unpublished, called Lonely Flowers. It's based on a piece written by Robert Schumann of that name. And I thought it was a very interesting title. You don't think about flowers as being lonely. So I tried to speculate on what might be the loneliest flower. Schumann ended his days very lonely, and I guess what we would call an insane asylum, where his wife Clara was not even allowed to visit him. The doctors somehow thought that would hinder his recovery. So, lonely flowers for Schumann. I never considered the loneliness of flowers until I played your Einsame Blumen, so deceptively easy as neglecting loneliness. Then needed to know the loneliest of all, not the showy honeysuckle or hydrangea, inviting bees to feast, forage, buzz as though making love, and definitely not the roses, so confident of perfection. The loneliest are wild daffodils, where Wordsworth wandered, cloud lonely, coming too early to have company and too short-lived to love even themselves. Clara did not care to perform these woodland scenes, sensing perhaps they foretold a dark forest of solitude in your mind that would lead to a river in winter, the end of music, confinement in a place you could not visit to bring flowers or songs. Others, like me, will find romance in your two voices that twice join here, a B natural and a B flat in lonely dissonance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. Your poems about music are especially appropriate for Chautauqua, where music plays such a vital part in our everyday routine here. Every day. We have a little time for Q&A if anyone has questions for either or both of our authors. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask? Yes, Sam.
Moxie, did you think about the fact that you wanted to include current events from that time in your writing?
The question is whether Moxie thought, sort of in a premeditated way, about including events from that era, late 60s, in her book. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. Absolutely. There's so many parallels to what was going on in the late 1960s and early 1970s to today. And one of the things that I wanted to illustrate in my book was we've been through difficult times before. They weren't pleasant. They caused divisions within communities, within families, within the country, but we survived. Somehow we muddled through and we came out better at the other end. And we're going to go through cycles like this, I believe, from time to time. But I'm very hopeful, personally, that our democracy will survive. And I wanted to illustrate through my book that there is hope. So, yes, thank you for the question.
And I'll try to hang on to that hope. Any other questions?
question from Moxie about, I read the book and, you kind of leave us wondering what happens to Cozy next. And so I was wondering, is there going to be a sequel?
The question is, with the kind of open ending that Virgin Snow has, is there going to be a sequel?
Yes. Right from the beginning, I intended this book to be the first in a trilogy. I wanted to write about one character and trace her narrative from the time she was a teenage girl to middle age. So the books will, all three books will be different time frames in her life. The other thing I wanted to do was trace the narrative arc of Buffalo during those three different periods. Because in this book, Buffalo is on the precipice of decline. We'll see Buffalo go through its decline and hit a trough and pull itself back out. So I think that this is interesting to follow the parallels of both a girl and her city over the space of many years. So thank you for the question.
Another question?
Carol, when you're writing poems, do you often work on multiple poems at a time? Would you find yourself focusing mostly on one and feeling like you finished it before you move on?
The question is whether Carol works on one poem at a time, finishes the poem, and then starts another, or has multiple poems going at the same time.
Usually it's one at a time, occasionally two. I'm not a fast writer, and it can take, one poem can take several months, so I have to have more than one thing going. Otherwise I never finish anything. I do like to mix music and poetry, and going back and forth playing the piano to working on a poem. That's an ideal way for me.
Any other questions? I just had a question, maybe two related questions. One is, you play the piano, do you get a sense of the poem you're going to write from your playing? Do you find that the rhythm of the playing, for instance, or maybe the harmony in the playing makes you think of a poem? Or is it more, I'm doing music, that's a little rough, but now I'll go back to poetry?
No, and definitely, I do get poems out of my music, and I'm not a very piano player. I'm very better writer than you. But I'm the Mendelssohn, for example, those songs without words. I'm kind of thinking of that poem at the same time that I'm working on those, and the same has been true with Chopin and even Beethoven. He wrote a few easier things that I can play, like for relief. And going to concerts, which I do regularly, I often get inspiration from hearing a symphony or concerto. You start thinking, you see the first line, a last line, a middle line.
I'm also reminded of an approximate quote. I don't have a photographic memory, but Carol Jennings once said that music is what language would be if it could. Let me make just a few closing announcements, but before I do, let's give a round of applause. Just a few literary reminders. Thursday at 3:30 in the Hall of Philosophy, Geraldine Brooks will be speaking about her novel Horse, which is the CLSC selection for the week. On Friday, right here on the porch at the same time, we have what we call a community reading day. 2 or 3 students from each of the workshops, poetry and prose, will be selected and reading, and poetry and prose teachers will have a few words to say. Also, they'll unveil the community poem. If I had a better memory, I could tell you what the prompt was if we, it's something, the recurring thing is something about ride every wave, if I remember, but I think you can find that at poetry.chq.org. For our sister art, where the theater is in a little bit of a pause between productions and workshops, but if you're around on Saturday, Lynn Nottage's Fabulation will be opening. And if you're around next week, please drop by the Author's Hour to hear novelist, mystery writer, Estelle Rauch read from Masters of Betrayal, and Alyssa Samarco read from her two recent books, See Them Now and Moon Landing Day. And a word to our people on Zoom. My apologies for sound not being present for the first 5 or 10 minutes. I'm crossing fingers that it did get to our YouTube video, which I will be posting. So if you missed out, or if you just want to relive this experience or share it with someone, it will be on YouTube. Once again, if you go to our webpage and go down to Author's Hour, it has the Zoom link. Or if that doesn't work for you, if you go on YouTube and ask for the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center channel, you'll have everything from this is our 5th summer. One of the talking about dark times and coming out better that inspired by 2020, we did it virtually and recorded it and put it on YouTube, and now everything from 2020 to the present is on our friend YouTube. Anyway, I hope you can join us in person, and if not, virtually. Take care. Thanks so much.